This is our very first guest, Jennifer Desrosiers. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Michael. I'm so excited to be here, and I can't believe I'm guest number one. What an honor.
You are guest number one. I was thinking I'm going to ask you some questions they ask at the end of the Actors Studio, actually. James Lipton is no longer with us. I love the Actors Studio. There was a questionnaire for those of you that don't or maybe do know, a certain set of questions at the end of the Actors Studio inspired by some interviewer named Bernard Pivot. And James Lipton adapted those into his own questions at the end of the Actors Studio. And for all of my guests, I'm going to ask the same questions. I bring that up, Jen, because Paul Newman was the first guest on the Actors Studio.
Very cool. Well, he's got some competition.
Right? He sure does. Um, so this is called multi-hyphenate mastery, and come on. So wow, I would love to start with your degree that has nothing and probably everything to do with what you're doing now. And maybe if you could just walk us through that degree, your early career, working for companies that again have little or nothing or everything to do with what you're doing now. So maybe you could, I would love for you to just kind of walk us through the inspiration to go get that degree, a little bit of your career, and then maybe if you could just bring us to when you launched Laney and Lou, and we kind of may take it from there.
Sure, sure. I was a pretty adventurous kid, but was also very studious and like a high performer in school. I knew that right away. And I don't know, I can't really pinpoint exactly when I knew that, being successful in my career was going to be important to me. I'm thinking it probably is something to do with the fact that my mother started a business when I was 5 or maybe 6. So that was very, that was something that I was used to seeing and being around, et cetera. But I remember sitting on the stairwell in middle school, and this was grade 8. My science teacher, Mr. K, came up to me. We were choosing classes for freshman year of high school, and he said to me, "What is wrong? What is going on with you?" And I said, "I'm really struggling with choosing these classes because I don't know what I want to do when I grow up." And that was when Mr. K said to me, "You are one of the smartest kids here. You have 3 options. You're going to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer." And I said, "I'll be an engineer." And then the rest is history. So I ended up going to college. Good old Mr. K. I can still see him. He was like the kind of that science teacher with all the dander all over his black shirt. It was brilliant. But anyway, so I went to school for architectural engineering, had a love of buildings, a love of urban environments, even though I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Vermont and really hadn't been to a giant city before. So I decided architectural engineering and the study of building systems. So it's a little bit of design, yes, but it's electrical, structural, civil, HVAC. And during that time, I got an internship working for a company that my dad worked for nearly 40 years. And in that internship, I was doing data entry, et cetera. And just like anything, I tend to weasel my way into opportunities. So I managed to team up with one of the senior VPs from the corporate office. This was a multi-billion-dollar global company, and he was visiting the office there in Vermont. I ended up working with him out of Augusta, Georgia, and I fell in love with the world of manufacturing. He introduced me to sales and marketing, branding strategies. In fact, he handed me my first business book ever called Positioning. And it sent me down this road of really understanding, really loving how to understand how businesses function and knowing that I wanted to not only be an engineer, but eventually be an executive and driving business strategy. And so rather than going into building systems, I managed to get a position with another manufacturing company in the plastics world. And that was in the position of manufacturing engineering. Again, a position that I wasn't prepared for, but I basically, told them that with my understanding of systems and procedure, and then now this background working for this manufacturing company, that I was the perfect fit. And eventually got into sales. And after 16 years, eventually found myself in a position where I was feeling stagnant. I was feeling like I was creating no impact. I was feeling ill. And I decided to take another path. And I created a wellness company, and then eventually Lainey and Lou. So that is a very, very short, like bullet point list of all the things that and all the steps that took me to Lainey and Lou. But there's obviously a lot of things happen in between.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, first of all, I never could have done what you've just done. If you would have told me to give me a brief, we probably would have been here for like 40 minutes or something like that. So thank you for collapsing, half of your lifespan into the like 5 minutes. One of the things that came up for me was your teacher giving you three options. I think it's so resonant on this podcast because you had three linear options:
Mhm.
doctor, lawyer, engineer. And I guess the question that I might ask you now that maybe you've considered it, maybe you haven't, how would your life be different if he didn't just give you three options? And if he said you can be whatever you want to be?
I think I would have taken so much more time and space to explore. I was an explorer in my mind. I said I was an adventurer. I loved being outside. I never had a moment way back then to connect all the pieces to really examine the things that I love to do, and then how could I create a career or a livelihood around those things. So I was an artist, a dancer. I was really good at math and science. I was a leader, a public speaker, even way back then. So it would have been really cool if he had said, like, you got a lot going for you. Let's not just go towards this very linear path. Let's see what could come for you. So maybe business is a better way. And it's so funny. I tell the story a lot. Back then, I don't know why, but that school system believed if you went to the business classes, you were not the smart kid. The smart kid went to, AP this or whatever. And I had to beg to get into, I never took a business class in high school, but I took drafting. And when I took drafting, everyone was like, what? She's like, I was number three in my class. Like, she's number three. What is she doing here? These are the not so smart kids. And I think that's shameful. So now I have been invited into schools to give talks around who are you, not what do you want to do? Who are you? Let's start there and examine those things and then start to piece together what the options are. Because now, obviously, people make a living doing all sorts of different things you would never have imagined.
I love the question of who are you instead of what do you want to do, especially as an actor and a trained actor. I'm writing a screenplay right now with a fellow actor, and the first thing we're starting with are who are these characters? And
Mhm.
we've spent our first 3 to 4 hours so far. We have an idea of the story, but really just talking about who are they? What's their core wound? What do they want? What are their faults? And I love the idea of asking who you are, and that also evolves over time. I would love to go back for a second to just kind of note something. One of the many things that's incredible about you is that you're able to do these two things very well that usually people only get to do one of. Engineering tends to sit in a completely different world and part of the brain than creativity. Yes, of course, there's creativity in engineering, but engineering feels like more of a process in a way of a linear kind of process, like an A-B cause and effect thing. Whereas creativity, as we know, can be just, who knows, all over the place. Can you talk a little bit about how engineering and that kind of mindset, how you get it to dance so well with your creative mindset, how those two things are coming together?
I'm not sure I can actually analyze like how my brain works and why it works, but I do know that for me, like when I really think about engineering, I couldn't tell you really how an engine works right now, for instance. But what I can tell you is usually what's the simplest way to get to from A to B. If you gave me a complex problem, specifically with a process, like we're gonna try to get from here to here. I might not get it the most efficient in the first time, but I'm very iterative. So and I have a very strong love for continuous improvement. So we're going to eventually try so many patterns or so many iterations of this process to get A to B. And I feel confident that we're going to get there. And maybe that's a willingness to fail. So maybe wrapped around there is this sense of adventure. And obviously, within adventure is a ton of creativity.
Mm. I really want to talk about adventure, so I'm just marking that right here. I do want to ask you this question, if you're comfortable sharing. So, when you decided to start Laney and Lou, which we're going to hear all about here shortly, when you decided to go into this particular industry, and I understand you had some health issues that you had to deal with. Can you talk about those a little bit? And then also, was that before or after you started Laney? Like how does that kind of what did that journey look like with health? Because you're also a certified yoga instructor, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, in
Yeah.
2010, I started to feel sick. I couldn't really establish what was going on with me. I knew that it was primarily happening in my kidneys. At the same time, I had an aunt that was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had a little bit of an ovarian cancer scare. And then, so I was like, yeah, I was going, what is going on with my kidneys? What is going on in my family? What's going on with this other thing, which ended up being totally fine. And they could not, really, the kidney thing ended up being the primary thing I was trying to sort out. It was just debilitating. I would go out for dinner and then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh my God, like I feel like I need to go home. And so I obviously put together that pretty much when it was happening while I was eating and it was happening right away. The doctors could not sort it out. And so I opened up, I opened up a book by Christiane Northrup around women's bodies and the wisdom of women's bodies, and just started looking through like inflammatory foods or food response, things like that. And there's one line in the book that just says like, soy, sugar, dairy, gluten can be inflammatory to some bodies. And this book, I would have to grab it out of my stack, but this book it's old, it's been around for a long time. And I went to the doctor and asked them, what do you think? Is there anything to this? And they said, absolutely not. That's not going to do it for you. And I said, well, I'm going to try something else. And so I researched it. That diet, as you probably know, is called the paleo diet. So I quickly went paleo, and within, 72 hours, I was a brand new person and have never had the amount of energy and lightness, etc., that I was experiencing at that time. So wonderful experience of marrying that discovery with yoga and mindfulness. And of course, my whole life was just shifted in that moment. And I decided to go down a very different path.
Was there a moment? Yeah, I love these moments of decision. So let's go. We'll go to Laney and Lou. Was there a moment of decision that happened where you're like, you know what? I'm putting a flag here, and I'm going to go forward, and you kind of steered a new path.
Yes, that particular moment, there had been a lot of pivotal moments that led up to this particular moment. Like I had, by the time this story happened, I had already left my corporate job. I had already created my health and wellness company. I was an active yoga teacher. I was health coaching. So a lot had happened.
Can I interrupt you
And
for one moment?
yeah.
To the leaving the corporate job, to not glaze over that. What inspired you? Because it's a tough decision for a lot of people to stay or to go. It's a
Mhm.
huge decision. It's a multifaceted decision for all of us, with many layers and many considerations. For you, if you don't mind, and pardon my interruption, Jen, could you just briefly talk about uh, what inspired you to leave that job? Because it's my understanding from a traditional job perspective, you were doing very well. And you and I have had conversations personally about, what it's like to have a very well-paying job and travel the world and have all those kind of fringe benefits. And then to quote, let those go can be a big decision. So what for you, what launched you away from the job, if you will?
Two things in particular. I had noticed, again, with this whole wellness approach and this mindfulness approach, I started to notice that I was introducing myself in new groups or communities as, hi, I'm Jen. And this is what I do for my career. And I really do nothing to impact community. And it just rolled off my tongue as if I was like asking for forgiveness. And I was so turned off by myself for doing that. But it was very real. It was a thing that was happening. And then during yoga teacher training, we did the work of Byron Katie, and Byron Katie has this, flipping, questioning activity that you can do. And so around you have to say something, you have to make a statement, and then your partner during this exercise will ask you, is that true? So I made the statement of my success is clearly correlated by my career. And then when she asked me, is that true? I had to look her in the eye and say, of course it's not true. Of course it's not true. And it was in that moment that I decided I'm going to leave my corporate job. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know that there's something that is being lit up inside of me. There's a freedom that I'm feeling with the practice of yoga, health and wellness, etc. And I can see the impact that my enthusiasm around it is creating in my communities. Let's see what happens. And I literally went home that day, and my partner at the time, I said, I'm leaving my corporate career. He was like, oh shoot, this is going to be interesting.
So leaving, was there a certain amount of time before Lainey and Lou came up? Was it a year, 2 years? Just kind of understanding what that timeline was like from when you left your corporate job to when you launched this new venture, one of
Yeah,
many ventures.
it was over 2 years. Yeah, well over two, almost probably closer to 3 years that it took me to leave. So I did other things in between. I didn't think that I would open up a restaurant. So while I was building my wellness company, which was scaring the living daylights out of me, so I wasn't really putting all of my eggs in that basket. I was still consulting in my old world in my corporate career. So that was way easier for me when my last boss came to me and said, I still have a couple projects, like losing you. I was number two in the company. So he's like, losing you is a big hit to the company. Would you still maintain a few projects? I did that. So it was a great distraction from the things that were scaring me the most. I was walking to a meeting and I looked through the window of what is now Lady and Lou Exeter. And that was when I had the vision. I saw it. I knew it in that moment. I was like, I'm going to open up a restaurant here. And I gave myself one big milestone, and that was to find a hospitality environment that I could go and participate in for a week. It's called a stage. And most people stage for free. I actually paid that restaurant to let me do it, which is probably one of the stupidest things I ever did. But I paid him to let me come in and participate in the kitchen operations, participate in the front of house operations, and sit down in his office as many times as I wanted to during the week and ask him questions. And I told myself, if you end this week loving it, if you enjoy yourself, then we're going to keep moving forward on this restaurant journey. And I did. I loved it. I put in like 70 hours that week for this guy. He actually asked me if I would stay and run his restaurant. And I said, nope, I'm going to go. He didn't know. He didn't know I had my own thing. So I went back that next week, signed the lease, and 3.5 months later, Laney and Lou opened its doors.
Wow, I have to highlight something here, Jen. There's this expression I know you know, burn the boats, right? I did and I didn't, and it sounds like you did and you didn't either. So for those of you out there, it sounds like you did decide to leave your job, but you were still working as a consultant. So it wasn't a like complete severing, never talking to these people again. You continued, the relationship mutually benefited in a different form. And it's one of the things that I often have a hard time grasping is that there is a middle ground or many, many middle grounds. It's not an either or. So what it sounds like, two things that were really, really big in your journey that I hope the listeners are picking up on is one, you left your job, but you continued to consult. So that was one, income for you to support you in this transition. So you're able to kind of move in and not full time, right? So it was less of a commitment and less of a drain on you. But at the same time, it was kind of a transition. And then at the same time, instead of just getting a loan and opening a restaurant, you're like, let me hang out and let me understand this first. Is the day-to-day something that I even want to do? And it's something that we all have to consider. It's like, I want to be this. The next question is, okay, what's the day-to-day like? are the things that you're going to have to do day to day are enjoyable for you. And it's like for me, I love acting, and for a long time I hated auditioning. But you're never going to act unless you learn to love auditioning, because
Exactly.
most of the time you're not working. Like 99.9% of the time, even the best actors in the world are not working. So for me, it took me a long time to one, understand how to audition, and then two, to enjoy the act of auditioning. And then things really started to change. But for the first few years, I just wanted the results of being an actor, not the process of being an actor. So it sounds like you were very smartly able to transition, kind of fade one thing out and then fade one thing in. And then eventually you of course did take a leap, but you made it, but there was a clear decision and then a transition, it sounded like.
Yes, absolutely. And during that time, I was teaching yoga, growing my health coaching business, consulting for company A, consulting for company B, and then starting this restaurant. And I did that all the way up until day one. And then I remember after day one, I was very naive going into this thing, to be honest. And I think it's a fun story now that I'm glad that I did this, but I thought we would have 25, 30 customers on day one. So I maintained all of those other things that I was working on. And after day one, I called a couple of the people that I was still consulting with. I called the owner of the yoga studio and said, okay, I've drastically underestimated what this business is going to take me. I don't think I can continue. And all of them laughed and they were like, yeah, no kidding. We were all anticipating that. I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad you were. And I felt like I let everybody down. I tried to do like some coaching and teaching after that, but that first year it was beyond hard. And so I'm glad I had the opportunity to let all the rest go. But I agree. I talk to my coaching clients all the time about this. There's a time maybe when you need to burn the bridge if something's really not serving you and that's holding you back. And there were certainly moments in my story where I was like dragging the boats along with me, because I was too afraid to let them go. But oftentimes people think it's all or nothing. And in this journey, I don't think that's smart, because then most likely fear starts to creep in. You start to get paralyzed and now you don't know what to go. And then you're lost in the art of inaction.
Take us to Lainey and Lou. So here we are, Lainey and Lou. And if you don't mind, if it's okay for you, you don't have to, of course, give us exact numbers. But it's my understanding that you thought it was going to be one level, and then that level, maybe from a percentage standpoint, you could share with us what happened.
Yeah. Well, I thought that we would have 30 customers day one. My 8.5 by 11 spreadsheet, so we opened in September. So it went September to September. And I thought 30 customers on day one, 90 customers a day by the end of 12 months. And it'll be this sweet little business that does, something like $300,000 a year. And it just worked. The rent was so low. I thought we could do it with a handful of employees. I'd run my wellness business out of the back, and it was nothing like that. So it was 100 people on day one. We were serving 700 people by the time we hit the following June, July. And this is a day. And we were doing, 300, 400% of what we anticipated in the first year. We were blowing every statistic, like KPI, out of the water for the industry: sales per square foot, sales per seat, sales per labor hour, sales per employee. It was staggering. And I knew, I'm like, okay, I'm a restaurateur. Like, I had to make a decision that was, this is now my new life. I've gotten myself into this in a way, and now I'm going to do the best that I possibly can. And there's so much wrapped into the concept of Lainey and Lou. It's a true reflection of how I love to eat and the simplicity of food. But what I wanted to show people is that, you can eat these incredibly beautiful, nutrient dense foods and have it be approachable and taste good and create an experience, like a hospitality experience around that is inclusive, that is welcoming, and that is kind of, it's attracted such a diverse community of people and created such a ripple effect of impact in the community that I saw it. I saw it all before we opened. I'm just so grateful that it's actually come to life as big and as beautiful as I knew it could be.
Let me ask you this question. If When did this vision come to you? Did you have any idea when you were maybe an undergrad that you'd ever wind up being a restaurateur? Was there a hint of it, or is it a new thing? Like when did it?
There was something in my childhood that, like, do you remember Folgers? I think it's
Of
probably
course.
still a thing. And
Yeah.
Folgers used to have a series of, I can still, like, you flick, whatever, you peel the thing open. It was really dramatic, and then smell the coffee. And then the woman's in, she's in the window seat all curled up. I was like, I want to be that woman when I grow up. I don't know why I was so in love with that commercial. I do feel like it conjured up this feeling of coffee is peace. It's just like this beautiful little cozy up process. And so I did early on in my 20s dream of having a coffee shop, but I thought this is something I'm going to do, when I'm retired. I dabbled in it a little bit. I'd hear of an opportunity. I'd walk through the shop. I wasn't ready for it, but this time around it was different. I was very clear. I want to serve the food that is serving me. I want to serve the food that I am looking for. I'm traveling all over the country for my corporate job all the time, cannot find this food. That is insane to me. And it started, obviously popping up in California, eventually in New York, but for the most part around here, not so much. Or if people were doing it, they were doing a much more like watered down version of it. And I came out of the gates hot with more than 30 superfoods, things that people had never seen before, turmeric lattes and fat coffee. It was very trendy food back then, and it was so clear to me that it could be almost a turnoff because people were going to see things they hadn't seen before. So I baked into this a culture of making sure people felt included. That was so, so important to me. And that I'm sure that probably drives back to just my feelings as a kid, what I was looking for in my friend groups, how I like to feel in rooms. Everyone wants to be seen and be valued. That is something that we drill down into in everything we do.
So because you're so good at it, can we highlight? I want to talk about all the brands you have now, and I really want to talk about adventure and save some time for adventure. Um, so you had one Laney and Lou in Exeter, New Hampshire. Where are we now? Where are you now?
So 9 years later, it'll be 9 years in September. I opened my second Laney and Lou last July. I opened a complimentary business, an artisan bakery last September. Back in 2000, I had actually sort of rolled a menu category out of Laney and Lou and into a new business called Palette. So that one's going on 4 years old. And then probably about a year ago or more, when I knew we were in the process of adding more locations and diversifying our business, I wanted to bring my coaching business and my love of putting on epic events in the community. I wanted to bring that to the forefront in a way that made sense with my restaurant. And I don't know why, maybe that's the engineer in me. I oftentimes really need to have things organized in such a way that I feel like I can comprehensively bring them to the table in a way that makes sense, in a way that I can market and brand it. And bring it all together. And I know what I'm doing is unique. So we created a company called Altitude, and now Altitude is what some would call a hospitality company, but we also do coaching and consulting, and we also put on epic events, primarily geared towards women in business.
Okay, so here's the question. We have Laney and Lou location, brick and mortar in Exeter. You have a Laney and Lou location in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, two in New Hampshire. Where's Ginger Fox, your bakery?
Stratham, New Hampshire.
Stratham, New Hampshire. There's three. You have Palette, right? Which is what's the geography for that?
Yeah, so
Who can?
it's primarily e-commerce. So you order online, and we make it in Portsmouth, and then we'll deliver it, white glove delivery service up to 60 miles.
Okay, up to 60 miles for Palette. Then you have a whole another thing, elevate.
Mm-mm.
So the and more and more. So the
Yes.
question is, how? How do you do it?
Uh,
What habits, what tools, what routines help you stay well and continue to, because it's my understanding you actively manage these businesses,
I
July Farm.
do. Yeah,
How,
I do.
yeah, how do you do this, Jen?
I came into, well, 2023 was hard. It's not easy to open up two new restaurants in two new communities back to back. I knew I could do it because I know that I have a very large bandwidth, but it's not easy. So thank goodness I have a very, very strong and dedicated team. My senior leadership team is super strong. So of course we all get together. I don't make a decision unilaterally. So it's like, are we all in? Because we all have to be in. So those were important conversations to have early on. But everyone said we're in, and so we went for it. I will say 2023, it was a tough year. I was working a lot, and I think I'm always prepared. Like I know when the season shows up that and needs a lot of me, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being uncomfortable for long periods of time. It's part of the game. And we, as we were talking a little bit about adventure, like adventure is typically an endurance event. So I understand that with business as well, specifically in any time you're in a growth phase. So it takes about a year to settle into a restaurant. And so now that I'm almost a year into it in the second location, I feel space and more space to better organize the businesses. So coming into 2024, I didn't know I was doing this, but I started to we started to have conversations around strategic initiatives. Let's not try to take on too much. What are the top 5 things and how do we break them down every quarter, every month, every week, every day? So we're making an impactful difference on the direction of the business and on ourselves. That's always super important to me as well. We can't leave people behind or it won't work. They'll leave whatever else. And so I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but it's very, very close to the structure that Gino Wickman talks about in the book Traction. And so he lays out this whole operating system for businesses to organize themselves. So I intuitively have made many, many moves in my businesses that are in alignment with what he teaches. And he's teaching, obviously, business exercises and approaches that he's learned from some of the greatest people in the world. So that has really helped me bring in more structure. I know now I am a visionary in my businesses. And so my biggest work right now is to find someone, hopefully within my team, that can be the integrator that can really help drive the day-to-day operations and organize, because I'm really good at creating what Gino calls whiplash in my organizations, because I am so creative and I'm a fast thinker, I'm a fast mover. Let's do this, we could do that. Whatever I touch typically turns to gold. I need to be careful with that. That can be really destructive within your businesses.
I love the idea of not only knowing what you're good at, but also admitting and knowing what you're not good at. And being okay with, like, I suck. My old bosses, Ernie and Naomi, she would always say, Ernie's terrible at this. And Ernie would admit, I'm like, "Ah." And I would think to myself, well, he's a wealthy guy. They're doing very well. They've got to be great at everything. Oh no, Ernie's just terrible at X, Y, Z. And he'd be like, Naomi, you're terrible at blah, blah, blah. And they knew it. And they were really okay with knowing that they sucked at these things. They wouldn't even waste their time on it. And they complemented each other very well because their strengths and weaknesses kind of balanced each other out. So what I'm hearing, a part of this is going, hey, here's the thing or things that I'm really great at. These things, not so much. And I need to have someone else do them literally, because me spending time on them not only isn't helpful because I'm not good at them, but it's harmful because it's pulling you away from the thing you're brilliant at.
Yes, I think it's really important for business owners to figure out where they belong in their organizations. And I would say probably a year ago or more, I would have said, I'm capable of doing all of these things as well or better than anyone else in my organization. But now that I'm larger and my business has quadrupled in the last year, I can't sustain that. And I am way more aware of when I become a roadblock of my for my own success. And I don't see that as it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing that I can identify that and put someone else in the seat that they deserve to be in.
Thank you for that. And the vision of because I'm feeling it myself, because we're not nearly as big as you all. Soho Creative Studio is still really kind of a baby. But I can see if things start to grow, it's going to be impossible for me to try to keep my hands on everything. I'm going to have to let go. I'm going to have to trust other people to do things. Otherwise, growth is going to get stifled. And we started to grow a little bit, and then we pivoted, and now we're doing something a little bit different. So there's this like, okay, we can contract for now. But I'm going, well, Michael, like learn the systems, learn them. But this is not, and I'm kind of like you in that way. I love being out with people. I love selling. I love connecting. I love doing the interviews. I love being in the camera space. The processes, forget about it. If I could never have to implement a process for the rest of my life, I would be totally okay with that. Right now, I have to because we're small. But in the future, when things start to grow, it's just not how my brain works. And it's taken me a little while to go, you're not good at that, Michael, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're going to fail. It just means you have to find somebody who's better at it.
I totally agree.
So let's finish up with adventure. Adventure's big for you, an adventurous mindset. I've heard you say. What is this maybe obsession or interest or passion for adventure or the adventurous mindset? What does that mean for you, Jen? And then how does that take place in practice? Because I love practical stuff. So from a concept to how you feel about it, take us through that to how it finds its way into your everyday life, because I know it does.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's born from my love of being in nature, for just going out and seeing what the day can become. The art of adventure to me is there's such a freedom with it. You're expecting the unexpected, and it allows space and freedom for whatever is to come. And you're doing it with also what's called the beginner's mindset. If you're going on an adventure, promise you have never experienced that before. Even if you're leaving from say we'll use a hiking analogy. Even if you're leaving from the same parking lot that you've left for 100 times before, that hike up over and around that peak will never ever be the same. And so I love going into every situation that I possibly can with that type of mindset, because okay, let's keep on this one. I don't know, this is coming to me. I feel like it's timely because of the weather. If you leave the parking lot and you head up the summit that you've done a million times before, and it's black fly season, and you're getting killed. I don't know why this came to my mind, but and you're spending the whole hike like just like if you have hair, you're like, gotta get this hair, like it's killing me. You're bleeding and you're itching and whatever else. I guarantee you, the next day when you see someone and they're like, "How was your hike?" You're gonna be like, "Oh my god, it was so crazy. The black flies were killing me, but then I got to the top and it was beautiful and." Whatever else, I saw the sunset and whatever it is. So it's like that thing, the black fly annoying situation that happened, it becomes part of this epic experience, this story that we can then tell ourselves. And so along the way of life and business, etc., it's gonna be a lot of black flies. There are gonna be a lot of trees down. Shit's gonna happen that you weren't expecting to. You get a flat tire, whatever it is, something's going to happen. But if you go into it thinking, I'm going to go up the mountain, I'm going to get there, I'm going to get to the peak in 29 minutes, I'm going to see this, then I'm going to see that, then I'm going to have my PB&J, and everything is going to be just how it's supposed to be. And then the black flies hit, I guarantee you're going to be miserable through the whole experience. So I don't think that going into life, business, trips, etc., is very fun if you have it all mapped out, because I promise you, it's not gonna roll out the way you think it should.
It never
It
does.
never does.
You know, you reminded me of two big things. Sanford Meisner, the lineage of my actor training, Sanford Meisner would say, when you're in front of a camera or on stage, pray for something to go wrong. And you're like, why in the name of all that is sacred would I be on a Broadway stage praying for something to go wrong? And he said, that's your really only opportunity to stop acting and to start actually doing. And it's going to be so compelling for that audience. And I watched it happen in undergrad from an audience. It was a kind of like a 1930s play. She had this huge string of pearls, and it was a musical, so there's dance numbers and all that. She went to hug this guy and came back, and the pearls just went all over the stage. So you have a stage full of pearls, and they're about to do a big dance number. And it's like, and you know, it was a play that people knew, so it wasn't going to be a surprise. So the whole audience is just on the edge of their seat, and everybody's on the edge of their seat, on the edge of their feet, waiting to see what's going to happen when this dance number happens. And it all worked out great. But those moments there, and one thing I do have to say, it's easy to say this when it's just some pearls on a stage, but it's I think as important to embrace that mindset when it hits your stuff.
Hmm.
It's easy to go, well, I went on a walk today, it was hot. Yeah, but it's like when you're really challenged, like really,
Yes.
really challenged, either emotionally or spiritually or physically, or all three of those things at the same time. There's a second thing you reminded me of, a film called The Edge. Have you seen that with Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins?
I'm not sure. It sounds
It's a
familiar.
it's a fantastic film where these two guys get trapped out in, like, I think the wilderness of Alaska or something like that. And Anthony Hopkins plays this billionaire with like a really good mindset, and Alec Baldwin plays the guy who doesn't have such a great mindset. And Anthony Hopkins makes it a game. And he kind of loves this, and he's older. He's like loves this thing. He kind of loves that they're out there and wants to be successful and like kill this bear that's chasing them. And Alec Baldwin's like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So it's a really great example of someone embracing the black flies
Yes.
rather than resisting them and allowing them to be there and then working through them and realizing there's going to be something at the end of that. I love that. And then I also love, the overlap between what you're talking about and acting. Being a successful actor, you have to, even though you know your line, you have to behave as though you've never said these lines before. And we call it the feeling of the first time. So I
Mm.
think one of the things I've taken from you, many things today, Jen, is the feeling of the first time has to be present in adventure.
Hmm.
Even if you've taken that path, even if it's the same trailhead and the same hike,
Yeah.
approaching that situation as if you have never before, you're going to have an experience that you've never had, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Wow.
We have this saying at Laney and Lou, this process at Laney and Lou, and now in all my companies, and it's called the moments of truth. Now, I did not make that up. It is a marketing term, but we have defined the experiences of a guest in the 6 moments of truth. And every time a guest experiences us in one of these moments is an opportunity for them to make a decision on whether or not they're going to be back. Why? Because that is the first time they've ever experienced that particular moment. And so oftentimes people get like a little bit lazy in their businesses. They think, "Oh, I've got this customer, that one's mine. I'm not going to lose them." And if we approach life, relationships, etc., like this, there's always an opportunity for someone to make a decision. Then we're more apt to create greater levels of success. I think that's really been important to us.
Oh, I love this. I have a saying that us human beings are magicians. We can make anything we want disappear instantly, and all we have to do is take it for granted, whether it's a lover or a client or our health. And it's natural for us human beings to take things for granted. We have to take things for granted, otherwise we'd go insane. And we do have to pick and choose. But I love this idea of the moment of truth being a time when you just can't take. So they've been to you. So they've been through the door 10 times. Don't assume they're coming back for an 11th. Make
Exactly.
sure. I love that attitude.
Especially if you don't make them feel valued. So 10 times they walk into the door, you say, "Hey, how are you?" Whatever. The next, that 11th time they walk in, and you're just like, what can I get you? Not even engaging with them, blah, blah, blah. They be like, "You know what? I'm going to go to that other spot." Yeah.
This has been incredible, and we've come to the place where I get to ask you the Bernard Pivot question here for the first time. So the game here is you just be honest with your answers. They're very, very simple questions, And whatever comes to mind is what comes to mind. There's, I think, maybe 7 questions or something like that. Very short questions, very short answers. First question, Jen, what is your favorite word?
Freedom.
What is your least favorite word?
Overwhelm.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Adventure.
What turns you off?
Negative energy.
What's your favorite curse word? And you can say it.
Fuck.
What sound or noise do you love?
Mm. I just love, I guess we'll just say nature.
What sound or noise do you hate?
People saying they can't do something.
Now, this is an odd question for us multi hyphenates, but what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would 1000% be a Red Bull athlete if I could be.
Wow, that's awesome. Um, on the flip side, what profession would you never like to attempt?
Brain surgery.
I'd freak out. Same. Um, last question. If heaven exists and you believe in it, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, gosh. I'm feeling a little emotional by this question. You were enough.
Jen, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. It was so much fun.
My pleasure.